So as we continue to celebrate International Women's Day, we are lifting up so many amazing women across the globe who are fighting for basic human rights, something that every woman deserves. But time and time again, we are covering stories where women, even in 2023, are not treated equally. Take, for example, Iran.
In Iran, violent and deadly protests continue there following the September 2022 death of Mahsa Amini, which sparked a movement for women's rights across that country. And while there has been some progress in many countries for women,
a lot of work still needs to be done in Afghanistan as well. The UN reports that nearly 29% of Afghan women are still getting married before the age of 18, making it one of the most repressive countries in the world for women and girls.
Especially since they don't have a choice in a lot of those instances. There are people, however, they've dedicated their lives to try and change all this. Anita Bhatia is one of them. She is Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and Deputy Executive Director for UN Women. And we welcome you, Ms. Bhatia. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure to be with you.
So let's focus on Afghanistan for a minute because, you know, what, 20 years ago, that was one of the missions, it seemed, of the U.S. and of the world community in that war-racked country to raise up women who had been oppressed so badly. Now the Taliban back in control after the U.S. withdrawal. What's happening with Afghan women right now?
Well, look, we've seen that every single day, it seems, the Taliban wake up and say, what new way can I find to oppress women in Afghanistan? It's now been over 500 days since girls were denied their right to an education. It's almost 80 days since women were denied the right to go to university. And the latest decree from the government, which was that women cannot work in NGOs or international NGOs, is another death blow to the rights of women in Afghanistan. So it's a desperate situation. It's a terrible situation. And it's something the international community should not forget, even as other crises unfold, because we are condemning a whole generation to a life of misery and to a life where they cannot enjoy the basic rights that we, who are women of privilege, can take for granted in different parts of the world.
So how is UN Women working to help change that and just bridge the gap for women in these countries like Afghanistan?
Well, look, one of the first things we did was we made the decision when Taliban took over that we were going to stay, even though we recognize that, you know, when you're in an agency called UN Women, it's like a red flag to the Taliban. But we stayed. We have very brave and courageous staff who are still on the ground. And we are trying to work to keep civil society organizations and grassroots women's organizations alive. Because since the Taliban took over, 95% of these organizations have had to shut their doors. But there's still a number of them that are struggling to stay alive, to be a place of refuge for women who are being abused or victims of violence. And we're doing everything we can to support that.
You know, Anita, like so many American reporters, I remember doing hopeful stories on girls and women in Afghanistan, education, going to schools and seeing their faces and seeing their determination. And it was so moving and inspiring. And I wonder about them now. And I wonder, is it really possible for the Taliban? Because their dads supported it, right? Their granddads supported it, at least many of them that I spoke with. They can really turn the clock back, I guess. Do you think this is something that is permanent for the women of Afghanistan? You know,
it's a really good question. And I have to say, sometimes I ask myself, where are the Afghan men in this? This is not just a women's rights issue. This is an issue for all of society. So why aren't the Afghan men on the street saying, we want rights for our sisters, our our mothers, our daughters, our aunts, our friends? This is a whole of society issue. And frankly, until everybody gets engaged, I don't see this changing because the women are very brave. They've been out there protesting, demanding their rights, you know, since Taliban took over. But I don't see them being joined by Afghan men. And I think the Afghan men have a role to play as well.
So the 67th session of the Commission on the Status of Women just began. It'll take place up to March 17th.
Yes.
So tell me, what are you focused on within this time period to empower women and girls, not just in Afghanistan, but Iran and other countries that are still oppressing women?
Well, you know, this year's Commission on the Status of Women, which is the 67th Commission on the Status of Women. Women rights organizations, have been meeting at the UN for 67 years to push the envelope in terms of women's rights. So this year, the focus is on innovation and technology as a way to bridge the gender gap. And it's a really important topic because we know that technology and digitalization afford both opportunities, but also create more challenges for the whole agenda of gender equality and women's rights. So that's what we're discussing this year. And I have to say, the energy in these meetings is palpable. It is wonderful that we're able to meet again in person. Here in New York, when you walk down the streets in front of the UN, it's a sea of women. It is wonderful to see. I don't know if this is revenge travel, but we have a lot of people who are in New York because they feel so strongly that it is so important for all of us to come together and to continue to push back against the pushback, because we're living in an era where women's rights are being rolled back every day. The situation that we see is pretty dire, and it's great to see the energy around this topic.
And Anita, very quickly, we have been speaking about these dire situations in Afghanistan and Iran, but, the United States of America, a lot of developed countries have major issues too. How much of that is a focus of your work?
It's a very important focus because, look, sometimes in this world we feel we are running to stay in place. Because remember, we're living in a time when we are having to relitigate and refight all the fights that we thought we had won. And so those fights have to be relitigated, refought. So we have the old problems, and then we have all of the new problems that are being created by the lack of political will and by political leadership in many countries, which is essentially anti-women.
Well, we're so glad that you were able to come on and speak with us and get this message out and remind us of this day and the importance of it. And thank you for all the work you do, Anita Bhatia. Thank you.
It's an honor
My pleasure.
To know you.
Happy International Women's Day to everyone.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.